73% of all Australian property investors have only one investment property in their portfolio. That's quite surprising, isn't it? And 91% of all property investors have two or less properties in their portfolio. This suggests that less than 10% of Australians are competent property investors. And this is why I'm passionate about education and regulation in this area. Often people fail because they've made one or more of the following mistakes. These are the most common and significant mistakes that I see in property investing. As mentioned in Module 2, the net yield or the true holding cost of a property is not that easy to calculate, and many people underestimate the ongoing cost of holding property, particularly older property. Not doing various scenario costings or movements in interest rates, vacancy rates, changes in personal expenditure, and not allowing for buffers are very common mistakes for inexperienced investors. Often clients ask me about booming city fringe areas. These areas exhibit a lot of the growth attributes that I mentioned in Module 3. There's undeniably huge population growth and infrastructure spending in these areas, which are important demand-side growth attributes. However, as far as tightening of supply goes, well, there's usually enough land in these areas to keep them going for the next 50 years or so. You need both increasing demand and restricted supply for anything to go up in value. Often people confine their property research to the few suburbs around where they live or their favourite suburbs. As seen in Module 3, if you sacrifice just 2% of growth because you've ignored superior suburbs, then on a $500,000 property over 20 years, you could be sacrificing over $500,000 of net profit. There's an entire nation of opportunity out there. Don't limit your investment options. You can spend your weekends going to every auction and every open house, reading every estate magazine, trawling through the internet and negotiating your hardest. And if you're successful, you may be lucky enough to buy something tens of thousands of dollars under the genuine market value. But again, if you've sacrificed just 1% of growth to achieve this, then you're denying yourself of hundreds of thousands of dollars of profit over the long term. If you're following a buy and hold strategy, you're better paying fair value for an investment with great growth attributes than you are paying a discounted rate for an inferior asset. If you've ever had thoughts of buying an investment property near the beach because you'd like to stay there a couple of times a year and perhaps even retire there in the future, you're not alone. Many people try to combine lifestyle choices with investment choices. But at the times you would be likely to stay at the beach, you are probably also the peak earning times for your investment property. Holiday rentals also have high maintenance costs due to the large number of tenants and will often require a bit of a revamp every few years. It's likely that staying at the Marriott or the Airbnb will be a lot less costly in the long run. And when you eventually retire, you'll probably want something a bit bigger or better or less lived in anyway. Buying expensive real estate for status or boasting rights is another example of a fringe benefit. If you simply view your investment property as boring money-making boxes and don't make your decisions based on personal reasons, then over time you'll accumulate enough wealth to go and buy any beach house or penthouse that your heart desires. If there's a fringe benefit associated with any investment, you can be assured it's taking away from the overall returns. It's best to keep lifestyle decisions and investment decisions completely separate. A property may sell for more than what you think it's worth, and it may rent for more than what you would pay. And that's because there's obviously a market for it. And property markets are quite sophisticated and fairly accurate. It may not be the type of property that you would want to live in, but you don't have to live in it. On the flip side, don't think you see some charm or potential that the market doesn't see. This charm is already priced in. Investment decisions should be made purely based on the numbers and not on your personal biases towards property. It's important to acknowledge that 95% of all statistics are incorrect. Okay, I'm joking of course, but you get my point. Statistics are often misused and it's important to look behind the numbers to see who's quoting them. Some numbers can seem quite impressive at times, but pale in comparison when held up to just average compounding investment returns. When it comes to metrics used in measuring property performance, you'll often hear the words median growth rates used as a measure of price increases. Now, there's a couple of things that you should know about this metric. Firstly, the word median refers to the middle, not the average. For example, if only 5 properties were sold in a single year, then their median value would be the price of the third property and not necessarily the average price. This can distort real returns where there's only a small amount of data available. The big issue with how median values are used is that they only refer to properties sold within a particular time frame, usually annually. Let me give you a couple of examples how this may give a false impression of genuine growth. When new satellite suburbs pop up on the city fringes, the first home buyers may start building small, low-set, low-cost dwellings. And as time passes and more homes are built, shops, amenities and other infrastructure is invested to take advantage of the growing population. Consumers and speculative builders become progressively more confident in the suburb and begin spending more on new homes. Before long, you'll see 2-story houses and the occasional mansions pop up. Because people are now spending more on new homes in the area, and the fact that median values are measured at a point in time means that the medians are much higher in the later years of the suburb's development. This translates into large upward trends in median growth rates. However, it doesn't mean that those who bought cheaper homes in the years before are now getting any more for their properties. It just means that the market is now spending more on newer, bigger homes in the area. Another example is when, say, a large-scale luxury apartment block goes up in an expensive suburb with, say, spectacular views and million-dollar penthouses in it. And in the following years, they may only build 1 or 2 bedroom apartment complexes in, say, secondary locations within the same suburb. This, of course, will show a large drop in apartment median growth rates for that suburb in the years following the prestige development. Given the small number of apartments and townhouses sold in any one suburb in a given year, median growth rates are poor indicators of real price growth for these dwellings. Median values are only one tool used in assessing property performance and shouldn't be used in isolation. Just to take our example of median growth rates a bit further, it's important to make sure you're comparing apples with apples. You'll often see median growth rates quoted for apartments and townhouses, maybe 1 or 2 percentage points lower than that of houses in the same suburb when assessed over long periods of time. But quite often, the average house price in any given suburb will be twice the price of an apartment in the same suburb. If we were to spend the same amount on an apartment as we were a house in the same suburb, we would no doubt be able to purchase a luxury apartment. And luxury property usually achieves the highest growth rates of all residential properties. Conversely, if we were to only spend on a house what the average apartment costs in that suburb, well, it would probably be falling down, wouldn't it? It will also have very high expenses. So clearly comparing apartment growth and house growth in the same suburb is not comparing apples with apples, particularly in the inner suburbs where average house prices are very high. I think it's fairly well accepted now that there's no real news. All media is rewarded for the amount of views or clicks they receive. And it's also well researched that fear and bad news attract far more attention than that of good news. I haven't got much to say on this topic, except that as an investor, if you listen to market commentary, you would either be buying and selling every day and destroying your wealth, or you would never invest at all. A long-term buy and hold strategy usually yields the best results. But it does take a lot of nerve to stay calm when it seems as though everyone is telling you you're doing the wrong thing. We discussed strategy in the first module, and I hope what you got out of it was that everyone is different. We all have different incomes, liquidity requirements, risk profiles, goals, timeframes, etc. So it's impossible for someone to tell you what's right for you unless they've conducted a thorough analysis of your circumstances and are qualified and experienced in these matters. Friends and family may be well-meaning, but it's unfair for them to overlay their experiences, good or bad, onto you. If you've ever sat through a property seminar in the 90s, you've probably heard that the only component of property to rise in value is the land content, and that the building itself only depreciates in value. This sounds logical, but is an oversimplification usually used by those selling house and land packages out on the outskirts of town. The truth is, of course, that it's not the land or the building. It's simply the location or the opportunity to live somewhere desirable. If it were only the size of the land that dictated prices, then you wouldn't have tiny one-bedroom apartments in the middle of London selling for over $5 million. Supply and demand are the key determinants of price movements. If you were going to purchase only one investment property in your whole life, based on the tax treatment alone, it's more than likely that it should be bought within your superannuation. This depends on a lot of things, of course, but I'm simply making the point that using self-managed super funds or discretionary trusts or holding title jointly rather than individually can make a huge difference to the long-term mathematical outcomes. I could talk for hours on this topic, and it's where we see most of the bigger mistakes made. You can watch our video on debt management by clicking on the link below for more information on this. I see lots of families that are ready to upgrade into a new home, turning their old home into an investment property. They believe that this kills two birds with one stone, upgrading and investing. Sometimes the emotional connection with the original home factors into the decisions as well, and this can be really costly. Usually by the time they come to this, the old property has a low amount of debt attached to it, and they end up borrowing high amounts to fund the new home. In this case, the total debt is mostly bad debt, that being against their new home, and the good debt, the now tax-deductible debt on their old home, is comparatively low. This is the opposite of what it should be. In addition, the old home will have very little, if any, depreciation left to claim, and being an older home will more than likely have high maintenance costs. It's also likely that it's not of an investment grade or in a blue chip suburb. It's often better just to sell the old home, pay down the loan on the new home using the proceeds, then redraw equity to buy a new investment property with high debt, high depreciation, low maintenance costs, and in a high growth area. The emotional connection you have with your first home may end up costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars. A structured risk management plan may utilize tools such as buffers, insurances, investment trusts, SMSFs, wills, or even testamentary trusts. All of these things have inherent costs, of course, but a well-structured risk management plan is essential and should be viewed as just the cost of doing business when you're a professional investor. We all experience challenges in our lives, and without a contingency plan, your investment portfolio can just crumble like a house of cards. So there are my 15 most common mistakes made by investors when building a property portfolio. These are the things that contribute to the majority of Australians not becoming successful property investors or self-funded retirees.